Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Rodriguez-Watson. I'm one of the pastors here at Christ City. Thank you for being here today, whether you're here in the cafeteria or if you are on YouTube. I'm just delighted that you've chosen to join us for worship this morning. I want to say a special thanks to all of the young people, students, kids, yes, for leading us today. I wish all of them were still in here because I feel like I want them to hear this, but I want you to hear that we appreciate you, that this is your community and you belong here, and our faith is encouraged by your faith. So thanks for serving us, thanks for leading us today. I am going to be joined by a couple of students in a few minutes and a student worker. But before I do that, I just want to frame out the passage that we're looking at today. Acts 16 to 40 shows us how faith isn't something that we just talk about or think about, but it's something that we live, even when life gets really hard. Here's the situation. Paul and Silas are in the city of Philippi sharing the message of Jesus. One day they meet a young woman. She's a slave, and her owners are making money off of her because she has a spirit that enables her to tell the future. She keeps following Paul and Silas and shouting that they are servants of God. And finally, grieved by her situation and perhaps a little bit frustrated that she keeps shouting at them and shadowing them wherever they're going, Paul decides to cast the evil spirit out of her, setting her free. But here's the thing, is that her freedom comes at a cost. First, to her owners, because she can no longer tell the future. And so then they can't make money off of her anymore. And secondly, her freedom comes at a cost to Paul and Silas. Because her owners are furious that she's no longer like a money-making endeavor for them, they take Paul and Silas to kind of the town square. They falsely accuse them. As the young people like to say, they lie on her name. They stir up the crowd and get them thrown into prison after being severely beaten. And here's where the story gets really interesting. Paul and Silas are in prison. They've been beaten. They're like not just like in the like first cell, once you start getting into the prison. They're like in the innermost basement, shackled, worst case scenario prison situation. They've been beaten, treated unfairly, locked up, and left in the dark. If I put myself in their shoes, I'm probably next level angry, confused, questioning my choices, questioning how the goodness of God can allow something like this. But what do? They start praying and singing. In the middle of the night, bruised and broken, they worship. That doesn't even seem logical. It doesn't even seem logical. They could have been shouting. They could have been complaining. They could have been plotting their escape, and instead, they chose to praise God. And I think this is the question for us, is when we face injustice, difficulty, or moments where life feels unfair, how do we respond? Maybe for some of you, students in school, it's like being judged by your teachers or other classmates in a way that doesn't feel right. Maybe you're feeling the hardship of being overlooked or ignored, whether at school, for us adults, at work, maybe in your family or in your friendships. Maybe you've experienced some kind of racial injustice or been witness to racial injustice or sexual harassment. When these kinds of things happen, they are deeply unfair and it grates against us. It can leave us wondering if God sees or cares about these really difficult things. And I think that Paul and Silas teach us that worship and faith are not just things that we do when life is easy. They can be acts of resistance, choosing to trust God when life feels unfair. But here's something else to consider. Maybe Paul and Silas weren't just worshiping in spite of their circumstances. Maybe they were worshiping because of them. Hang with me here. Remember that Paul and Silas had been witness to the acts of the Spirit. They had just seen God at work. Last week, you might remember, if you didn't listen to the podcast, I would encourage you to go back and hear it. They were struggling to figure out where they were supposed to go. They were trying to get into Asia, and the Spirit of God kept just closing doors after doors after doors. Imagine how confounding that would be, how frustrating. Some of you know this, like you just keep trying and it just doesn't work. They finally found a place where their message was being received after having come to Macedonia and landing in the city of Philippi. And they met Lydia, and she and her whole household came to faith. She was the first convert in Europe. They had seen the Spirit of God at work in this place. They had seen the Spirit of God move on their behalf and show them where to go. They had seen the Spirit of God deliver this enslaved girl from this spirit and deliver her from her captors. Maybe they were worshiping because they had seen God at work in their midst. Yes, they were in chains. Yes, they were beaten. But they had also seen the power of God at work. So what if their worship wasn't just about enduring their suffering? What if it was also about celebrating the ways that God was at work around them? And this is where I feel like when we look at that celebration, we can be reminded that joy also is resistance. Joy actually can function to keep us out of the depths of despair and keep us from falling into a very common and human experience of just despair and loss of hope. In the face of their injustice and in the darkness of their captivity, they were moved to worship. They were moved to prayer. And so as they're praying and singing, something amazing happens. An earthquake shakes the prison, the doors fly open, and their chains literally fall off. Just think about that for a second. If you were locked up unfairly, and all of a sudden the doors opened up and your chains fell off, what would you do? I'm out. You run. You run, right? You run. But Paul and Silas, they don't leave. Instead, they stay. And because they stay, the jailer, the man in charge of keeping them locked up, doesn't take his own life. Instead, he falls down at their feet and he says, "What must I do to be saved?" Paul and Silas tell him about Jesus, and that very night he and his household, use this one instead, no problem. He and his households come to faith in Jesus. This part of the story makes us rethink what freedom really is. Is freedom just getting out of a bad situation? Or is it living in a way that brings life to others? Paul and Silas show us that true freedom isn't just about escaping when things are hard, when things are unfair, when we feel like, I just don't know if I can take this anymore. It isn't about just escaping, it's about bringing hope to others. So, what does this mean for us today? There are lots of ways that we talk about freedom. Political freedom, personal freedom, financial freedom. And what I love about Acts 16 is that it challenges our notions of real freedom, and it invites us to think deeper. So some of the questions that I'd love to pose to you today are, what are some of the prisons that people experience today? What if our faith wasn't just something we practiced in comfort, but something that shaped how we faced hard moments? What if worship is more than just singing? It is also a way that we resist despair and hold on to hope. See, Paul and Silas didn't let their situation define them. They let their faith lead them. And because of that, lives were changed. And to help us dig a little bit more into this, I'm going to invite our students and student worker to come up and share their thoughts. And I just want to remind all of us how hard it can be to sit in front of a group of adults and talk honestly about faith, and not have all the answers and still try anyway. So would you welcome our panelists as they come up? All right, I'm going to give them 1 second to introduce themselves. We have Christy, Elias, and Levy. And so thank you guys for doing this today. You didn't have to say yes, and I'm just really grateful. Tell us your name, your year in school, or what you do at work, and maybe one thing that you like to do in your free time, or maybe something that the rest of us don't know about you.
Hi everyone, I'm Christy, not in school, but I work with our teens, Teen City, and have worked with teens a lot over my life. And something you don't know about me is that David and I are expecting our second baby in September.
Hi, my name is Elias. I'm a junior in high school. I'm a part of Teen City. Shout out my leaders. And one thing y'all probably don't know about me is I like to ride dirt bikes.
Hey everyone, my name is Levy. I'm a sophomore at the University of Maryland studying psychology. And something you guys probably don't know about me is I like to work out at the gym.
Okay, so Paul and Silas, they were mistreated, beaten, unfairly punished. I wonder if you could describe a time when you experienced something that was unfair, and how did your faith help you respond in those moments? Elias, would you be willing to go first?
One time that I have been treated misfairly was on the way home from football practice. Me and my teammates, we got pepper sprayed on the bus. And a way that my faith worked through me was just through community. We surrounded one of my teammates' younger brothers because he got it the worst. And we went to the store and got milk for him, just so he could get himself back right. I think that's one way my faith and community helped me through that situation.
What comes to mind for me is an incident in senior year of high school. I had just moved back to the States from Hungary, planning to play one more year of high school basketball and have that experience in the States. And unfortunately, that didn't really go as planned. I only had a couple credits left, so I kind of, in Prince George's County, was going to do my school online and then play basketball at the school closest to me, which turned out perfectly legal and allowed. But it's a long story. I mean, I could talk about it all day, but pretty much athletic directors misread things, and long story short, it ended up in a day before the first game, me not being eligible to play. And it took about the whole season to figure it out, and it was a misread rule and something that they just weren't really familiar about. And that would have been okay, but it kind of ended in a lot of adults and higher ups in PG County kind of saying that, no, this is your fault. You weren't the one, doing, I guess I wasn't advocating for myself, which wasn't the fact, because I guess how I relied on faith in this situation was, to be honest, it was really frustrating. So in the moment, a lot of it really just felt like frustration. But kind of in hindsight and in the moment too, it was a really big challenge for me to, I guess, kind of how Lisa was saying, in a moment of me not having what I would have liked to be able to play, still trusting that God, that this is what he has for me. And ultimately, I grew so much from it. I learned how to advocate for myself, and also learned how to stay very respectful with the athletic director and other higher-ups while advocating for myself, which was a big challenge. But I definitely had to lean a lot on the faith, and it was hard. Most of that year, I was pretty down and depressed about it. But kind of after the fact, I was like, wow, I grew a lot from that.
So when I first moved to DC, I worked with a group of teens who had particularly hard home lives. And so we had a weekly Bible study. They used to come. I got them when they were freshmen, and we sort of met weekly all throughout their high school experience. So we became a really tight-knit group of, there was 5 girls. But man, it's really actually honestly hard to choose one because they experienced a ton of both big and small, just some sexual abuse, some violence, some serious things of situations of neglect. But one of the times that stands out to me the most was a young girl, I'll call her Kay. And in hindsight, I think she was definitely on the spectrum, and she had some pretty severe undiagnosed, untreated allergies. And the thing that felt really like unfair about it to me was, I mean, no matter how hard I tried, it was really hard to break through with her, and I feel like I never really did. But a really small kind of practical example is just like with her allergies, like no matter how hard I tried, and for the life of me, I could not figure out what her allergies were, and they were really debilitating for her. They caused her, she was pretty ostracized in general and bullied pretty seriously, even sometimes from the group itself. But her allergies just kept her from really being able to connect or being able to focus at all, and I just could not figure out what they were. And in hindsight, what felt so unfair about it was someone with maybe more means and support, like it could have been, she could have been supported so easily, not so easily, but so much better. And you know, all of my girls, I had relationships with their parents, and she just did not have the support at home. Like I couldn't even break through with her own family, and she bounced around a lot. And one day she moved, and we lost touch with her. And out of all of my girls, she's the only one I don't keep in contact with today. And it just is such a hard thing for me to reflect on, because it did feel like something that I really feel like those, myself included, like really let her down, and the system around her really let her down. I think the thing that I learn from her and how my faith sort of plays into it, one, I think I can learn, and we all can learn a ton from teens. They're so resilient. They have such an incredible resiliency in the things they experience. And I just am really motivated in my faith to show up and support them as best as I can, because they deal with a lot. And there's a ton of instability around them, and yet they really show up for each other a lot of times in really cool ways, and I think we can learn a lot from them.
Thank you. What I feel like I was hearing from you all are maybe the answers didn't come immediately for you, Levi, and in your story about your friend Kay. But there are lessons that are learned, and the Spirit of God is present along the way. And for you, Elias, hearing that community, you got to witness the power of community when you had that pepper spray experience on the bus. Talking about worship and community, Paul and Silas, they chose to pray and sing instead of giving up. Why do you think they did that? Can you describe a time when worship and or your community was a source of strength for you as you were navigating a difficult situation? Levi, I'm going to let you go first.
I don't think there's been one difficult time in my life where, I mean, I'm only 20 years old, so I'm sure I'll go through much more, but there hasn't been one like hard time in my life where I can't give credit to the people around me, and I don't know what I would do without them. And for the question about them singing, I mean, I don't know if anybody else feels it, but when we're in this room singing together, it just, something feels different, and I truly believe that there's something powerful about that, even if we can't put words to that. And just being in community and singing together, there's just something about it that changes changes how I feel inside. And one experience that comes to mind, about a year ago, I underwent 2 knee surgeries, ACL, MCL, and meniscus reconstructive surgeries, and my family was in Europe. Half my family, my parents live in there. I'm here with my brother. Got like grandparents and distant relatives in this area, but I honestly did not know how that year would go. And despite it being very difficult, there was always somebody there for me, my brother, my girlfriend, or somebody when I didn't have the power to pull through. Somebody gave me that power, somebody spoke to me, prayed for me, anything, and it always just somehow ended up making everything fine, one way or the other. And that's something that I'll always be grateful for.
A situation where community has helped me pull through, it's actually happening right now. It's kind of similar to Levy's situation. The football team I've been playing for the past 2 or 3 years just shut down, and I'm going into my senior season next year. So I'm in the process of trying to find a new team, trying to figure out like where to go. And it's really frustrating, it's hard, but like my community, my dad, my coaches, my teammates, my friends, everybody is surrounding me, and it's like, Elias, like, you got this, stuff like that. My athletic director at my school, she's trying to help me find a new school to play at, everything like that. Like, it's just super encouraging, even when I feel discouraged because it's my senior season, biggest season. It's just hard to like think like what's ahead, like am I even gonna play next year? But it's just super encouraging to see everyone surround me and help me out.
So there's another one of the girls who was in my group. I'll call her S. A few years after high school, she had a daughter, and she was pregnant, and I got a call one day. It was right at the start of COVID. She'd gotten kicked out of her house. Without really knowing what to do, Dave and I just invited her to come and her daughter live in our small, very, very small 1-bedroom apartment in the height of COVID. And we were pretty quickly overwhelmed with how to support her, how to find her stable housing, with a new baby really quickly approaching, and find her shelter. And I now know, but I at the time had no idea how to care for babies. And so I work at IJM. It's a Christian community, and we pray together often. And so I one time brought it up for prayer, and I just was like, I'm pretty overwhelmed and would love help. And within like minutes and days, I just had people like calling with really amazing support, and people just dropping off like hordes of baby clothes and clothes, and people connecting me to like resources in the city. And I got connected to some of her extended family, who was really, really wonderful. And we were able to like get her into a shelter, and it just felt like a time where I felt like community really stepped up. And it was a really cool picture of just feeling like, I mean, they didn't know her at all, and were just so willing to love and support on her. And so, yeah, I think there's something about the way community shows up that's that is an act of worship in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm reminded of, and I think I started with this as I came up after the last worship song, of how reorienting, this is kind of what I was hearing you say, Levy, how reorienting worship can be for us. In the midst of like all the things that we're carrying into the room on a Sunday morning, or in a situation throughout the week, worship is a reorienting that we can choose into. And community can be so grounding for us. Grounding for you as you were trying to find resources to serve this young woman, and Elias, grounding for you as you're trying to find answers and a way forward, as you're asking big questions and wondering, what's ahead for me? Those are really big things, and community and worship are really grounding. So let's talk for a minute about freedom and responsibility. When the prison doors opened and Paul and Silas had the opportunity to get out, they didn't run. What do you think they understood about real freedom that kept them there? Does anyone want to go first?
I think that they were very confident in who they were representing and what they were out doing. And I mean, it's unbelievable that so much so that even when the gates opened, they didn't run, but pretty much saved that guy's life who would have killed himself. And I think ultimately that's what we're all called to do if we believe in Jesus, is to just do what they did, even though personally I don't know if I could do that in that situation. But I think they really deeply understood their calling, and they were confident in it. And I wonder if they questioned themselves, but they probably didn't even question themselves and just went up and were like, yeah, no, this is what we're going to do. And they ended up adding to the numbers. So.
Yeah, I think that they knew that real freedom came through the power of community, and like how they prayed for that jailer so he didn't kill himself, and like just stood there with them and was like, yeah, like we got you, even though like you put us here, like we're gonna help you do this and stuff like that. Community is where real freedom comes from, and like spreading God's love.
I love that, Elias. Thanks. I think it's such a great question. I think that there is sort of two types of freedom that we find in Scripture. I think there's freedom from and freedom for. I think there's really clear incidences of freedom from oppression and enslavement and situations of abuse, and I think that's right and good, and Scripture talks a ton about that. And there's also Scripture, I think, that talks about what are we free for. Like, it is for freedom's sake that we are set free. And so I think it would be really, really understandable if, as the doors open and the chains fall, which I don't understand how the earthquake makes that happen, but that they would just assume that I am being set free from this oppression, I'm being set free from wrongful imprisonment, which I think is right and good. But they clearly had a sense of something else that they were being freed for, which was to like preach the gospel to this jailer, and that there was like another sense of like what they were being called into as well, and that clearly for them was something that was clear and powerful, and actually quite remarkable that they would choose to stay and do that.
Yeah, awesome. One last question: if Paul and Silas were here today, here in Minor Elementary, what do you think they would say to us? How might they challenge us to live differently?
Again, such a great question. I think there's a lot of things to take away from this passage, but as I was reflecting on it, the thing that felt really, really unique and crazy to me is that they would actually, like, is how much they loved and cared for the jailer to do that. Like, he was clearly the one who either did like perpetrate their abuse or at least oversaw it. And after, they say, hey, don't harm yourself, we're here. The first thing that he does is dress their wounds, which are wounds that probably he gave them or oversaw. And so I think it would be really understandable if they wanted to target their anguish and frustration toward the person that perpetrated it. And yet they don't. That's clearly not the story. And that actually, in choosing to stay and to minister to him, it was actually an incredible act of love toward him. And to say, like, actually, this is the greater purpose here is actually to love on you. And I think a lot of us are experiencing and witnessing injustices where it's really easy for us to be frustrated and want to target our frustration at the people who are who are doing it. And yet I think there's a lesson for us in this grander environment right now here in DC around what does it look like to still love and pray for the flourishing of the people who are responsible in a lot of ways for the injustice or the anguish or the areas of unfairness that we're experiencing. I don't know how to do it. I'm not saying I do, but
I think Paul and Silas would tell me personally, like if they were here today, like how they showed God's love and mercy to the jailer, they'd probably tell me to do the same. Like within school, like walking along the street to the store, like if I see someone that needs help, like help them. Even like in the smallest thing, like pick something up for somebody that they dropped it, things like that. Or even like spreading his word to my friends or like around my city, even like my neighborhood, when I go play basketball at the park, just anything like that. Show God's love and mercy throughout my neighborhood and things like that.
Yeah, I piggyback off of what both of them said. If they were here in DC with everything going on now, I think that they would tell us to continue to trust in the Lord, and we're kind of going through the Acts sermon and learning how to like interact with the Spirit and feel it and what to do with it, and I think that's been really helpful for me. So I think they would just continue to give us faith, more faith to trust in that and keep doing it, even when it may feel like it's not doing anything at the moment. I think they would tell us to keep getting here together, singing, getting in community, small groups, praying, outreach, everything that the church is doing. I think they would tell us to keep doing it with even more faith.
I think you're right. I think you all are all right. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists? Thank you. Okay, you guys can. So as we transition to a time of communion, which we do every week, we take communion together as a way of reminding ourselves that it's not just up to us, that Jesus has done the work to set us free and to be our source of strength. And we don't have to have all the answers. And what faith is just living into what we know as best we can.